Western men have become so weak. Do you believe a depression is coming?
Well, I mean, if you've watched the documentary that we did, Economic Prosperity for All, we're in the boom bust cycle. You get about a 12 to 15 year cycle where you get the boom. We just hit the tippy top of the boom, especially in real estate in the last year, and now they're pulling back really hard and raising rates. And so what happens is the money supply has been expanding. You saw crypto take off, you saw stocks take off, you had real estate take off, assets of all kinds, even used cars took off, wages took off. You had inflation and everything because you had so much money that was printed and pumped in the economy. Plus, you had the cost of oil was driven up by the policies of the people running the governments in the West. And then you had the war in Ukraine, which exacerbated it, which is just kind of a war of the oligarchs of the World Economic Forum. It's really we're kind of all the pawns, the Russians, Ukrainians, the rest of us. We're kind of caught in the middle of their turf war, basically, because Putin is one of the, Klaus Schwab, he's on video. He bragged in years past how Putin was one of their young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. And it's like the whole war is basically the turf wars of the different oligarchs and the elite of the world. And the rest of us are the ones that are fighting and dying and having to live under threat of nuclear annihilation because of their incompetence, their stupidity, their corruption, their treasonous behavior to their governments and their countries. And so we're kind of all caught in the middle of it. But right now, with the money supply contracting, the economy's contracting as well. That's why you got Google, you got Amazon, you got, I think Tesla's got hiring freezes. They did lay some people off, but their manufacturing has continued to grow and hire people. And you got Jeff Bezos. You had pretty much every major CEO says we're going to head into a recession because that's just part of it. And so you talk about a soft landing is like, they want to start lowering rates again in maybe another year or so to start increasing the money supply and, kind of taper the withdrawal of the money, but it's always violent. And so, violent on the economy and construction and real estate. And, I'm 53. I've seen what happened. Volcker pulled back really hard in the late 70s. Reagan came in, they loosened, and then they tightened towards the end of Reagan's term, and then you had the S&L crisis that happened, and the RTC and all those properties got sold off, and then real estate started to come back, and then you had the dot-com bust, you had the crash in 1987, and it's like, you're just kind of, as the money supply expands, like it has been the last several years, everything increases in values. Your stocks, your investments, the economy does great. People are making money, buying TVs, whatever. And now that it's contracting, you're seeing less of that. I see it in the real estate around here. Rental prices are dropping, home values are dropping, and it's part of the boom bust cycle. It's like the time to buy real estate is probably going to be 2 to 4 years from now when that thing kind of bottoms out. Um, Stocks typically, all that stuff, when the Fed starts lowering interest rates, that'll start expanding the money supply, and then you'll see the market. And if you just look at like what happened when the Lehman Brothers event in 2008, and then that was like the top of when you look at the stock market from the top of the market to the bottom, then you had the Lehman Brothers event. It seemed to be a full 2 years from the top to the bottom. And then again, they start lowering rates. But when you bankrupt millions of people and they lose their homes in foreclosure, they lose their jobs in construction, they max out. Like right now, people's savings is declining tremendously. The average American, the money they have in the bank is dropping because they're using it because everything's more expensive. They're paying bills, and their revolving debt is going up. So people are using their credit cards to buy their food and to survive. And eventually, they max everything out. And when they max it out, that's when they start defaulting. And when you have a lot of defaults, typically a house, it usually takes 6 months before the bank starts foreclosure. And then after that, you're at least 6 months before they can foreclose on the property. So that's a year from the time you stop making your payments till they can get the property back and do something. But if you file bankruptcy, then it's another year. And so, like when you saw those properties kind of peak in 2006, 2007, then they started declining, and it wasn't until around like 2012 or whatever where they started coming back. And it wasn't until just 2022. My dad had a property he bought 20 years ago. He bought at the top and he wasn't able to get rid of it because he was upside down until just this past year, where he was able to sell it. And so the idea is you want to buy low, sell high, and so it sucks because a lot of people are going to lose their jobs and everything. But this is why the rich get richer: is they pass this knowledge on to their sons and their children, and the wealth that they leave behind. And so they start out at a young age, understand the boom bust cycle: when to buy stocks, when to sell stocks. You sell them at the top, and then you wait for the crash, and then you buy them back when they're cheap, and you ride it up. And same thing with real estate. A friend of mine had these Saudi Arabian investors that had, like, I think it was $500 million, and they bought all these condos at $25,000-$30,000 a pop that had previously been 120,000 downtown Orlando, and then all these things they liquidated last year for like $250,000-$300,000. So in a decade, they basically 10 times their money. And plus they were earning rent on these things the whole time. So they just absolutely crushed it. They made a shit ton of money, funds their operations, funds their family. And so you get generational wealth like that. But the average middle class and regular people, they don't understand how the system works. And they get wiped out. They get crushed. The middle class gets crushed. Poor people get crushed. All the people that sold their crypto when it went down, they got crushed. And what happens is you get, the people that have money and understand how the system works, you buy when, as the old saying goes, when there's blood in the streets and nobody wants to buy. So depression, recession, it doesn't matter. The money supply is contracting, so everything contracts. And it always creates a bust cycle. It always hits real estate. And so there'll be opportunity to buy properties in a few years when most people aren't really buying. And if you understand how the cycle works, every 12 to 15 years, you ride it to the top, liquidate it when it gets to the top. And then when it crashes again next time, you go and you buy in the cheap. I even, when I was flipping houses years ago, I saw properties that I had bought, fixed up, and sold, and then 4 or 5 years later, saw them again come on the market because the people had trashed the houses and then lost it in foreclosure or whatever. And sometimes we would buy the same house, 5, 7 years down the road. It was the life cycle. So if you understand how the system works and watch our documentary, Economic Prosperity for All, you can profit. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money in the next few years.